phone screen was the only source of illumination in my living room, casting a stark, cold glow on the weary lines of my face. Another sleepless night. Another endless scroll through social media, trying to numb the persistent ache of grief that had become my constant companion. I'm Emily, a software engineer, a woman who thrives on logic and order, but my life had been anything but orderly since Clara, my younger sister, died 6 months ago. The silence of my apartment, once a comfort, now felt like a vast, echoing void, amplifying every unanswered question about her sudden, inexplicable passing. It was 1:17 a.m. when my phone vibrated with a notification, a new voicemail. My brow furrowed. No one ever called anymore. It was always texts. I clicked the notification, expecting a telemarketer or perhaps a missed call from my perpetually forgetful mother. What played through my speaker wasn't a pre-recorded message or a dial tone. It was Clara's voice. "Emily? Oh God, Em, you have to help me, please." My blood ran cold. The phone almost slipped from my grasp. Clara, my vibrant, impulsive, fiercely loving sister. She was gone. A rock climbing accident, they said. A single fatal slip. I'd buried her 6 months ago, watched the coffin lower into the cold earth. But her voice, ragged with terror, was undeniably real, flooding my silent apartment, filling every corner with an impossible presence. I'm stuck somewhere between fire and ice, Em. It's burning and freezing all at once. I can see, oh God, the faces. They're everywhere. They want me to join them. Please, Em. You have to find me. Don't let them take me. Find me, Em. Please, before it's too late. Please help me. Her voice dissolved into a strangled sob, a sound of pure, unadulterated agony that tore at my heart. Then the line went dead. The voicemail ended. My mind reeled, trying to process the impossible. My gaze snapped to the phone screen. The voicemail details stared back at me, stark and unblinking. Caller Clara. Timestamp. Received 1:12 a.m. 5 minutes ago. How could she call? She died 6 months ago. My perfectly ordered, logical world shattered into a million impossible pieces. A wave of nausea washed over me, a dizzying sense of disorientation. The air in the room grew heavy, stagnant, tinged with a faint, almost imperceptible scent. Something acrid like burnt sugar, mixed with a biting metallic tang, like dry ice. My breath hitched in my throat, hot and dry. I squeezed my eyes shut for a moment, trying to rationalize, to dismiss it as a cruel prank, a technological glitch, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and grief. But when I opened them, the silence in the room was no longer just silence. It was a suffocating, heavy blanket, pressing down on me, amplifying the frantic thrum of my own pulse. My past trauma, the guilt over not answering Clara's last call before her accident, the constant anxiety that hummed beneath the surface of my daily life. It all felt amplified, magnified by this impossible message. Was this a manifestation of my own fractured mind? Was I finally losing it, succumbing to the creeping darkness of my grief? Or was something truly there, something tangible and malevolent, twisting my reality? I fumbled with the phone, my fingers trembling, trying to replay the message, but the voicemail icon had vanished. The message was gone, as if it had never existed. Yet the memory of her voice, her desperate plea, was seared into my mind. My own voice, trapped in my throat, could only manage a pathetic gasp. My eyes scanned the room, propelled by a primal fear, searching for an anomaly, a sign, anything that could explain away the terrifying impossibility. The chilling cold, the phantom smell, the ghostly message. It wasn't a prank. It was a violation, a direct intrusion into my perceived sanity. And I knew, with a horrifying certainty that chilled me to my very bones, that if I didn't find out what happened, if I didn't try to answer Clara's impossible call, my nightmare would truly begin. I sat there frozen, the phone still clutched in my trembling hand. The voicemail, the impossible message from Clara, was gone, vanished without a trace, leaving behind only the echoing phantom of her terrified voice in my mind. The oppressive silence in the apartment felt heavier, permeated by that faint, unsettling scent of burnt sugar and metallic ice. My mind raced, trying desperately to cling to logic, to rational explanation. A sophisticated prank? A deep fake? But the raw emotion in Clara's voice, the specific plea of between fire and ice, those details felt too real, too intimate to be fabricated. My past, which I had tried so desperately to outrun, flooded my mind. Clara's death had been sudden, a shocking blow. She'd been on a solo climbing trip, pushing her limits, as she always did. The search and rescue team had found her equipment, but never her body. They'd concluded she must have fallen into a deep crevasse, lost to the mountain's icy grip. But now, between fire and ice, twisted that narrative into something far more sinister. My grief was a heavy cloak, but the guilt was a burning ember. The last fight we'd had, the unanswered calls, the unsaid goodbyes. My fear wasn't just for Clara, but for my own sanity, for the erosion of the reality I had so carefully constructed after her death. The atmosphere in my apartment thickened. My phone, once a lifeline, became an object of dread. I found myself checking it obsessively, pulling down the notification bar, refreshing my voicemail, desperate for the message to reappear, to prove it wasn't a figment of my unraveling mind. Each time it was empty, but then it would glitch. The screen would flash, displaying impossible caller IDs, long strings of numbers that defied any known format, or sometimes just a single unsettling symbol, like a fractured snowflake over a tiny flame. The battery would drain rapidly even when untouched, and the phone itself would feel unnervingly cold to the touch, despite the warmth of my hand. Subtle oddities began to punctuate my days. My usually reliable smart home devices started acting erratically. The thermostat would suddenly drop to near freezing temperatures, then spike to unbearable heat, fluctuating wildly despite my attempts to adjust it. Ice crystals would form on the inside of my windows even on warm days, and simultaneously, the distinct smell of ozone and burning plastic would fill the air. I tried to explain it away as faulty wiring, an old building, but the precise, impossible combination of fire and ice was a chilling echo of Clara's plea. My conversations with others grew strained. I hinted at the voicemail to my best friend, Liam, a fellow engineer who prided himself on his pragmatism. He listened with a patient, pitying smile. "Emily," he'd said gently, "I know you're hurting. Grief does strange things to the mind." My mother, still deep in her own sorrow, dismissed it as a sign, a dream, clinging to any spiritual comfort. Their disbelief only intensified my isolation, my paranoia. They couldn't see it, couldn't feel it. I was alone with this horror. The tension in the apartment was a palpable thing, a taut wire stretched between my perceived sanity and the chilling reality. The hum of my refrigerator, the distant sounds of city traffic, all seemed to be overlaid with a faint, persistent static, like a radio struggling for reception in a storm. And sometimes through the static, I swore I could hear faint, almost imperceptible whispers, too indistinct to make out, yet unmistakably there. They were cold, like air seeping from a freezer, and sometimes They were searing, like the hiss of embers dying. One night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my phone, which I had placed face down on the nightstand, began to vibrate. Not a notification, not a call, a rhythmic, insistent tremor accompanied by a faint, high-pitched whine. I picked it up, my hand shaking. The screen was dark, but through the glass, I saw it. A small, flickering image like a distorted, grainy video. It was a hand, pale and skeletal, reaching out from a swirling vortex of shimmering heat and swirling frost. It was Clara's hand. And from the phone itself, a low, guttural murmur, overlaid with a sound like wind howling through an Arctic wasteland and the roar of a distant inferno, began to emanate. It was a single, elongated word, stretched and distorted, yet utterly clear. M.A. My blood ran cold. The phone wasn't just a receiver, it was a conduit, and the nightmare was just beginning its true descent. The elongated, distorted call of my name, emanating from my phone, shattered the fragile quiet of the night. My hand, still clutching the vibrating device, froze. The flickering image of Clara's skeletal hand reaching from a maelstrom of fire and ice on the screen pulsed with an unholy light. The faint smell of burnt sugar and metallic ice intensified, filling my lungs, making my head swim. This wasn't just a voicemail. This was a direct connection, a terrifying bridge to the place where Clara was trapped. I scrambled out of bed, dropping the phone onto the carpet. It continued to vibrate, its eerie glow illuminating the darkness, the distorted image of Clara's reaching hand still flickering on its screen. A wave of pure, unadulterated dread washed over me. My mind reeled, grasping for a rational explanation that simply wasn't there. Hallucination? A sophisticated new form of grief-induced psychosis? But the cold that radiated from the phone, the biting heat that emanated from seemingly nowhere, the visceral terror clutching my heart, it was all too real. The phone's vibrations intensified, causing the entire nightstand to rattle. The faint sounds emanating from it grew louder, more distinct. It wasn't just the roar of fire and the howl of wind anymore. I could hear distorted screams, not Clara's, but many voices, all echoing with immense suffering. And then cutting through the horrifying din, a wet, sickening squelch, like something soft and yielding being torn, followed by a choked, desperate gurgle. My physical body felt heavy, sluggish, as if gravity itself was increasing. The room seemed to waver, the familiar walls of my apartment stretching and contracting, the furniture subtly blurring at the edges. My reflection in the dark window opposite the bed shimmered, distorted, revealing not just my own terrified face, but swirling patterns of impossible heat and frost behind me. My sense of time, too, was fractured. Seconds felt like hours, then microseconds. Was this a curse, madness, or something far more ancient? Something that played with the very fabric of reality, drawn by a connection to the dead? The phone, still on the floor, began to rise, slowly, steadily, hovering a few inches above the carpet, suspended by some unseen force. The image of Clara's skeletal hand on its screen grew larger, clearer, its fingers impossibly long and thin, tipped with blackened nails. It began to tap rhythmically against the glass, a soft, insistent tap, tap, tap. And with each tap, the distorted screams from within the phone intensified, becoming a cacophony of agony. Suddenly, the apartment was plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness as the power flickered and died. Only the malevolent glow of the hovering phone illuminated the horror. The temperature in the room plummeted, a biting, arctic cold that burned my skin. Simultaneously, from the opposite end of the room, near the window, an intense, searing heat began to radiate, like standing before an open furnace, crisping the air. I was caught between fire and ice, just as Clara had described. Then, from the phone, Clara's voice emerged, clearer now, but utterly devoid of her usual warmth. It was flat, monotone, overlaid with a chilling echo of the screams and the sounds of fire and ice. "Emily," she rasped, "they found me. The ones who collect voices, they make you sing forever." Her voice cracked, then dropped to a low, guttural murmur that sent a shiver straight through me. But they need more voices, to keep the fire burning, to keep the ice from taking everything. A horrifying realization dawned on me, colder than the Arctic blast in the room. Clara wasn't begging for my help to leave this place. She was begging for help to bring others in. She was not a victim seeking rescue. She was a lure, a conduit for whatever entity was trapped or thrived in that horrifying place between fire and ice. And then, as a final soul-shattering shriek tore through the air, emanating directly from the hovering phone, the image of Clara's hand reached out from the screen. Not just on the display, but physically, tangibly, a spectral, skeletal hand emerging from the glass, its blackened fingers stretching towards me. It was surrounded by swirling heat haze and shimmering frost. The phone vibrated violently, its light pulsing with a sickening rhythm. My nightmare was far from over. It had just begun its true claim. The skeletal hand, shimmering with an impossible aura of both heat and frost, reached out from the phone's screen, its blackened fingers stretching towards me. My body remained frozen, paralyzed not just by terror, but by a profound sense of resignation. The room was plunged into an oscillating torture of extreme cold and searing heat, the air thick with the smell of burnt sugar and metallic ice. My mind was screaming, replaying Clara's chilling revelation that she wasn't seeking rescue, but more voices for a horrific chorus. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the spectral hand retracted, drawing back into the phone's screen. The light died. The vibrations ceased. The oscillating temperatures stabilized, returning the room to its mundane, chilly baseline. My apartment was dark, silent, ordinary once more. The phone lay on the carpet, inert, its screen black and dead. There was no visible damage, no broken glass, no scorch marks. It seemed perfectly intact, pristine. But I knew what had truly happened. There was no peaceful resolution, only a terrifying, unsettling quiet that hummed with a hidden malevolence. My body ached, a deep, bone-weary exhaustion settling into my limbs. I stumbled to my feet, my legs wobbly beneath me, and fumbled for my emergency flashlight. Its beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the empty space where the phone had been hovering, highlighting the ordinary carpet. But the coldness lingered, a subtle internal chill that radiated from my very core. My grief over Clara's death had not just been a burden, it had been an open wound, a beacon for something that existed beyond the veil of life and death, something that fed on despair and lost connections. The immediate nightmare of the impossible phone call had ended, but its true resolution was a twisted, unending torment. I tried to convince myself it was a dream, a hallucination brought on by grief and sleep deprivation. I powered up my laptop, desperate for the comforting glow of normalcy, the familiar hum of the internet. But the insidious changes had already begun. The ultimate twist revealed itself subtly, insidiously, like a creeping shadow. I tried to check my emails to immerse myself in work, but my laptop's screen flickered erratically, displaying flashes of static. Then, the impossible numbers Clara's caller ID had shown began to appear in random places, on my screensaver, embedded in website URLs, even as the timestamp on my internal clock. They were a constant, chilling reminder of the breached barrier. And then the whispers began again, not just in my mind, but from unexpected sources, from my laptop's speakers, a faint, high-pitched keening barely audible beneath the digital hum. From the refrigerator, a low, guttural murmur that swelled and faded. And sometimes, from the silent, inert phone on my carpet, I would swear I heard a faint, persistent static, like a dying signal trying to reach out. My physical sensations, too, were irrevocably altered. I would feel sudden, inexplicable blasts of Arctic cold, followed by searing internal heat, oscillating rapidly, burning and freezing my skin from the inside out. My skin sometimes felt unnervingly dry, as if all moisture had been leached from it, while other times a faint sheen of frost would appear on my arms, only to vanish moments later. My reflection in the mirror started to change. My eyes, always tired, now had an unnerving depth, a dual quality. One pupil seemed perpetually dilated, like a black void, while the other held a faint, shimmering red glow like a dying ember. I was no longer just Emily, the software engineer. I was a receiver, a conduit, irrevocably linked to that horrifying place between fire and ice. The paranoia that had always simmered beneath the surface of my life flared into a full-blown inferno. Every flicker of light, every drop in temperature, every whisper of static was a reminder of the entity that had touched me, that had used Clara as its lure. My world, once a stable blueprint, was now a fractured, terrifying landscape of dread. I had survived the voicemail, but the voicemail, it seemed, had never truly ended for me. It had simply found a new, living recipient. The static is constant now, a low, persistent hum beneath every sound, every thought, an internal broadcast of torment. It's the hum of 1,000 lost souls perpetually trapped between the searing agony of the unquenchable fire and the biting despair of eternal ice. My experience with voicemail from the dead taught me a chilling truth. Some connections, once made, cannot be severed, and some voices will echo forever. My life is a haunting reflection of that impossible call. I try to work to maintain a semblance of normalcy, but my mind is constantly pulled to that other place. The grief for Clara remains, but it's now intertwined with a profound terror, a chilling understanding of her final moments. I didn't save her. I merely became another listener. My survival feels less like a victory and more like a permanent state of being tethered, a silent participant in a cosmic agony. I sometimes find myself drawn to lonely places, quiet corners of the city where the static is clearer, where the whispers are more distinct. I stand there, listening, feeling the rapid shifts between icy cold and searing heat on my skin. They are calling out for someone to listen, for someone to give them a voice. And then there's my phone. It never truly dies. Even when the battery reads 0, it will glow faintly, its screen displaying those impossible numbers, or the symbol of the fractured snowflake over the tiny flame. And sometimes when I pick it up, the static clears, and I hear it. A faint, almost imperceptible whisper. It's Clara, still there, still begging. Emily? Oh God, Em, you have to help me, please. But her voice is different now, less desperate, more resigned. And sometimes, beneath her plea, I hear a new voice, a low, guttural murmur that speaks of ancient hunger. It's the voice of the entities that collect voices that make you sing forever. They found a way out. They found a voice, my voice, and as I listen to the endless static, to Clara's repeating plea to the hungry whispers beneath. I sometimes find myself whispering back, my own voice raspy with an unnatural dryness, tinged with a subtle smoke and ice. Yes, Clara, I'm here, I'm listening, always. Because the voicemail never ended for me. It's simply waiting for the next answer, waiting for you.